Well, hey there, and welcome to Tiny Team Big Ripple, how you can build a small equity driven business that has a big impact. I want to start us off with this question. Have you ever looked at the online business world and thought, if I see one more person screaming about seven-figure launches or going viral, I am just going to chuck my laptop out of the window? This is exactly how I feel because the truth is that most of us do not have venture capital sized budgets. We don't have massive teams. We don't have the privilege of unlimited time or energy. Instead, we have tiny teams. We've got competing priorities. We're probably juggling a million different balls. And yet, we still have a very real desire to create a business and to build a business that doesn't just make money, but actually has an impact, a business that actually matters. And yet, it can often feel like we can't do that unless we're bigger. And the reality is that's because business advice everywhere we look is built on this myth that bigger is better, that faster is better, that louder is better. But the thing that no one really tells us is that that kind of scale at all cost culture, it's what burns us out. It's what makes us want to quit. It's what makes us feel like we can't really do this. And in particular, it leaves marginalized folks, so women, people of color, disabled folks, LGBTQIA, anyone for whom the system was not designed for, the very people that are most impacted by financial inequity, it leaves us on the sidelines when we're given these messages about what we have to do to have businesses that count, if you will. So today I want to show you another way. I want to show you the smaller, slower, way that we have followed that looks ordinary on the outside, but I think is actually radical at its core. So, for those who don't know me, hey there, my name is Meg K. Wheeler. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am a CPA turned entrepreneur with over 15 years plus at this point of experience in the finance and tax world. I am the founder and the CEO of the Equitable Money Project, which supports marginalized business owners through accessible financial education. And really, our goal with the Equitable Money Project is to help marginalized folks build successful, sustainable, stable businesses in order to grow their impactful wealth. So that we can eradicate economic inequity together. And one of the ways in which we're doing that really is our financial education. And that works so well because my superpower really is breaking down the overwhelming money stuff so that you can understand the financial aspects of your business. And when I got into this business, when I started this business, it was because I wanted to take my financial expertise and really use it to have a big impact. But I also knew that I didn't want to grow $1 billion business. That just wasn't the right fit for me. On the personal side, I am the mom of a very rambunctious, actually just turned 8-year-old. I need to update my slides, and our rescue dog, Edie or Edith. I live by the beach. I race on one of Boston's only all-women sailboat racing crews. I love to travel. I love to read. And I do dabble in politics as well. I ran for state senate back in 2020, and I'm actively working towards racial, social, and economic justice. So political activism is something, and financial activism is something that's very important to me. So I want to just tell you a little bit about who Equitable Money Project is and what it means for us to have an impact. So I mentioned the Equitable Money Project was started because I wanted a way to eradicate economic inequity. I think we all probably know that our society and our economy was not designed for many of us to succeed. And in fact, many of the levers in our economy only work when there are people at the top and there are people at the bottom. And so the Equitable Money Project was really meant as a way to make financial education a lot more accessible for marginalized folks who traditionally and still to these days are really left out of these systems. And so for us at the Equitable Money Project, this idea of having an impact has really been rooted in who we are and everything we do from the very beginning, because this is literally why we started Equitable Money Project, was to have an impact. But I think it's really important to think about this question of what does it mean to have an impact? Because again, we see a lot of what we might call impactful, successful people who have big audiences, who are making 7, 8, 9 figures. who are on all of the talk shows and they're writing books and they're doing all of these things. And are they having an impact? Sure, they almost certainly are having an impact. But is that the only way we can have an impact? And so I think this is such a good question because the word impact gets tossed around a lot and it can, I think, be really vague and also misleading for folks like us. So for us at the Equitable Money Project, having an impact doesn't mean having the biggest audience. We definitely don't. It doesn't mean having the biggest budget. We also definitely don't have that. Or even the loudest voice. I mean, I think we're pretty opinionated, but we're not everyone knows us, right? Our voice is not everywhere. And so for us, having an impact is really about asking this question of how does the work we're doing affect the people that we serve and the people that we employ, the people that, we work with, and the communities that we touch. So when we're thinking about impact, it's less about our bottom line, it's less about those metrics, and it's more about how the people in our ecosystem are affected by the work that we do. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, but just some examples. For us, impact is about designing our offers and our work in a way that makes them accessible for people to actually use and to engage with and to make progress with. And again, with a particular focus on people who are usually shut out of this financial work. And so we're really thinking about how we position things so that we're not just delivering the kind of mainstream traditional financial advice, but we're delivering it in a way that allows our people to truly make progress and move forward. I think for us, impact is also about recognizing the histories, the traumas, the lived experiences, and the barriers that our clients carry, and then building systems that actually meet them where they are. We're creating a world that works for them instead of demanding that they retrofit themselves into the world that already exists. For us, impact is also about shifting the story. So it's about using our platform, however big or small it may be, to challenge harmful narratives that we see out there, and instead to replace them with ones that are rooted in equity and dignity. And it's also, most importantly, about choosing sustainability over scaling. Because I know that I could build a business that brought on hundreds and thousands of people and knocked everything out, but that's not the kind of impact I want to have. Because again, I go back to that first question. How do the people that we work with feel? How are they affected by the work we're doing? And the way that we would work with people, if we were really just focused on scale alone, would be very different than the way we work with people when we're focused on sustainability. And so for us, it's really about creating something that allows us to show up for our people over the long haul. Impact is really about responsibility. It's about refusing to pretend that our business operates in a vacuum, basically. It's about recognizing that every choice, whether it's pricing or language or our tech stack or our systems, or even how we structure our week and our schedules, how all of this creates ripples. And so the question for us is, and the question we constantly ask ourselves when we're making decisions is, are those ripples helping or are they harming? So I want to kind of start off this whole thing with this takeaway, which is that big money, having a business that makes a ton of money or brings in a lot of revenue, does not guarantee a big impact. Or maybe, perhaps I should even say it differently, it doesn't guarantee the impact that you want to have, right? Because it may be a big impact, but it may be actually harming and not helping. But instead, when we make choices from a place of ordinariness, from a place of equity drivenness, when we're making choices that really focus on the impact that we want to have, we can do that at any level of business. We don't need the millions of dollars. We don't need the huge team. We don't need any of that to actually have that impact. Reality is you do not need those things to make a difference. What you do need is clarity around who you're trying to serve and the impact you're trying to have. You need consistency. You need to show up for your people in ways that are meaningful and impactful over and over and over again. And you need care. You need to actually care about what you're putting out in the world and care about how you're working with people and the impact that your work is having on them, and not just about the money that you're making or the bottom line. So, like I said, in today's world, choosing not to consider the impact of your business is a privilege. If you're not building for equity, then you're benefiting from inequity. Because if you're not thinking about how you're structuring these things to have an impact, then most likely you're having an impact that is harming someone, if not many people. So for us, we're not about the viral moments. We're not about working to the bone. In fact, we don't work Fridays. But yet we're still able to create those ripples that have an effect, have an impact that goes far beyond just our capacity as a small team. And the way we do that is because we design our business essentially from the bottom up to be equity driven. Every decision, every conversation, we're infusing the impact we want to have into that process. This is everything from our offers to our content to our workflows, our schedules, like I mentioned. All of this is built with that impact that we want to have in mind. In our case, supporting marginalized communities. So today I'm going to walk you through the very unglamorous and unsexy ways that and systems that let us have this impact, this big impact that we set out to have, even with a small team, even with a small bank account. And so we're going to look at 5 different things that we do in particular, how we design offers that are actually accessible, how we use our content to shift narratives, not just sell, how we prioritize relationships over going viral or algorithms, how we enter emotional safety and how we create safe spaces for our people, and then how we redefine success as sustainability instead of scale. And so what I'm going to share with you today is not about hacks or secret formulas. It's about showing you what's possible when you stop trying to build something that is someone else's version of success. And instead, you start designing a business that is ordinary and extraordinary and impactful all at the same time, and that you do it in your own way. So the first one that I mentioned, designing our offers. This is really where it all starts. When we think about how to have an impact, we think about making sure that what we're creating actually supports our people. Most businesses, it seems like these days, say that they want to be inclusive. But if you look under their hood, their offers are actually built for people with privilege, whether it's time, money, tech access, confidence, neurotypical brains, no money baggage, you name it, right? Everyone else is kind of expected to just adapt to the way, like the normal way that the world works. That's not how we play. All right. That's not the game we're in. So at the Equitable Money Project, when we are thinking about how to really be impactful, we're thinking about how we can design our offers to make them accessible to the people that we want to reach. It's not an afterthought. It's actually the foundation of everything we do. And so this looks like a couple of things. It looks like, or a few things. Number one, sliding scales or varied price options. So we will offer this a lot, whether it's with courses or memberships or even our one-on-one strategy calls. We'll have sliding scales. So basically kind of like a pay what you can model. Or if we want to have a little more control around it, we'll oftentimes do 3 price levels. And we'll make it very clear you get the same stuff no matter which one you choose. So you're not sacrificing anything. But we make it clear that the levels are really for where you're at in your life and in privilege. And so that top level is for folks who have plenty of privilege and have the additional funds and can really contribute to support the work and to support other folks who don't have the financial privilege that they do. That lowest rung is really for folks who are not in a position of fully paying for whatever is being provided, but we still want to make that work accessible to them. And then of course that middle level, is kind of that perfect middle ground, right? Of, you may have a few extra resources, but you're not quite at the point where you can fully, support at that highest level. And when we tell people that we do this, I get a lot of folks who ask, well, doesn't this confuse your people? No, it doesn't, because we make it really clear at our levels what each represents, what each stands for, or what each level is for, like who it's for. So it's very clear for people to choose, oh, that's where I'm at right now. We also get a lot of folks who say, well, doesn't everybody just pick the cheapest level? And we have now done this a bunch of times, and I can tell you it has never been the case that everyone has chosen the cheapest level. And in fact, I think every time we've done this, our average price is above the middle or is like at or above the middle level. So most often people are choosing the middle or the highest level. We occasionally get, some people who choose the lowest level, and I'm glad that they do. Really glad that that was an option for them so that they could access our work. But more often than not, we're getting folks at that middle or that higher level. Now, another thing that we really focus on is low lift and accessible technology. And again, you may not think that this is having an impact, but when someone comes to us who is neurodivergent, as I am, when someone comes to us who doesn't have a lot of extra money to spend on tech, as many people in our community, when someone comes to us who doesn't have a lot of time to figure out new technology, having an impact in the world is making the technology that we use so freaking accessible so that it doesn't become a barrier to the people we're trying to serve. So this looks like choosing accounting systems that aren't QuickBooks. We work with Wave apps primarily because it's easy to use. It's a very accessible technology. We're often trying to find free technologies if we can, or things that are really easy to implement. We do a lot of walkthrough videos and how-tos on our technology so that nobody gets stuck because, again, we don't want to make this a barrier. We're also really big about plain, shame-free language. So especially in the world of finance, we could bring out all the jargon. But again, when we're thinking about how do we really have an impact, we don't need a huge budget to talk like humans, right? We just need to say things in a way that regular non-financial people are going to understand. And that alone has such a huge impact because the number of folks in our community who have come to us and said, I didn't understand this stuff before, but you're the first person I've heard talk about it like a human, like you're a human being and not like an accountant robot, right? That alone has a huge impact. So when you're thinking about how does this show up in your own business, it's just thinking about like the impact doesn't have to necessarily be saving the world or donating millions of dollars. It can just be making the work you do that much more accessible for people. And I think lastly, that comes through also in our anti-shame messaging, because again, if we had messaging around, like I think Dave Ramsey is the one that comes to mind, around how you're basically a horrible person if you have debt, or if you go spend any money on yourself that isn't paying for necessities, that kind of messaging is having an impact, but it's not having the impact that we want. It's shutting people out of the conversation, and it's making financial education and financial, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but financial experience and expertise. It's making it inaccessible for so many people because it's sending the message that you don't belong here. This isn't for you. There's something wrong with you. So these things are really important to us when we're designing our offers for how we work with people, to make sure that the work we're doing is accessible, approachable, and impactful. Now, the second thing that we do, and I think this is a huge thing that anybody can do when you're wanting to have an impact and you don't have a huge budget or any budget, is to really think about what you put out in the world, your content. This could be podcasts, YouTube, emails, social media, whatever. There's blogs, Pinterest, like lots of other things I'm forgetting. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs approach content like a giant sales funnel, which I get it. That's what's been drilled into our minds, right? Like you got to build the funnel and you got to get people on the list and you got to do this, you got to do blah, 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 right? Like if you post enough, if you pitch enough, if you push enough, eventually somebody is going to buy, and you're just going to like boom, 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 drilling into them, right? Well, we flipped that. Our content is not a sales funnel. Our content is not solely or serving that purpose of getting money from people. Our content is our mission. Our content is the single most important and impactful way that we can change the world. And so we have decided at Equitable Money Project to use our platform to change the story. It's never super salesy or pressury. It's always just like, hey, did you know we do this really cool thing and here's how it could help you. So that's our content. But how do we actually make our content our mission? How do we have an impact through our content? Well, first and foremost, and absolutely most important, is we incorporate our values. So from the very first day of having this company and every year since, we are constantly reassessing and reevaluating our values. For us, equity is a big one. Justice is a big one. Inclusion, accessibility. Those are all really big and important values for us. So when we're approaching our content, we're always thinking about not as an afterthought, not like, okay, I've recorded the YouTube video. Now how do I make sure it meets the values? But as I'm approaching it, the topic, the title, the script, the slides, the way I'm showing up on camera, the way, like the medium we're delivering it, whether it's YouTube or Substack or podcast or whatever, we're always thinking about, is this in line with our values? And is this serving our people in the best way possible, while maintaining and holding true to those values? To give you an exact example of this, because I think this always can be helpful, for example, in our Biz Money bulletins, I do a message every week from me. We don't shy away from big things going on in the world. We don't like ignore it and just start talking about bookkeeping. If something big has happened in the world that week, which let's face it, these days it feels like something big is happening in the world every single day, we're addressing it because we recognize that the money stuff can't be siloed. We recognize the fact that our people are human beings who are engaging in the world, and there's a lot going on, and it's affecting how they are showing up and how they're feeling and how they're going through the world. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing it. And sometimes we tie those things back to financial stuff, and sometimes we don't. But at the end of the day, we're not treating our email as something to check off, to send out so that people will buy from us. We're treating it as another way to show up and support the human beings in our community, and to bring us all together even more, because we are all connected and we're all in many ways, going through a lot of the same things. And so I think it's really helpful for us to show up and show that we understand that. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but meeting our people where they're at. So what I mean by this is, we recognize that the people in our community are full, whole people with histories and lived experiences and traumas and baggage and mindsets and stresses and all of these things. And instead of either showing up and pretending like none of that exists, which is what a lot of people do in the finance world, or showing up and sort of telling them just like suck it up and get over it, we show up and we actually acknowledge them. We acknowledge the outer and internal forces that make the work we do really hard sometimes, because we want people to feel safe and feel welcome in our space and know that this is a place where they can grow, but also where they can falter a little bit, where they can struggle and stumble, and that's okay, because we've created that safe space for them to do that. And then lastly, when we're creating our content or sharing our content, we're always thinking about how can we help. So, this actually kind of goes back to our values a little bit. Even though I said we're always speaking out on things, we're not speaking out on things just to say something. We're always thinking about, is what we're about to do with this content, is this going to help? Or are we just adding another voice to the void? Are we, causing harm that is unnecessary? Like, we're just making sure that the work we're actually doing is being impactful in a good way, in a positive way, instead of just feeling like we need to check that box. And so, again, every piece of content that we put out there is really designed to shift the narrative. And in our particular case, to make finance less scary, more human, and actually very useful for the folks who have historically been excluded from the conversation. What that looks like in your business may be different, but thinking about how you can use your content, your platform to further your mission instead of just selling, I think is really important. Now, do we sell through content? Absolutely. That's one of our primary ways that we sell, but it's not the point, right? We're not just creating something to get someone to give us money. The point is that if you're not using your platform to change the story, then all you're doing is adding to that noise, and you're definitely not creating impact, or again, at least not that positive impact. So the third thing we focus on in our business to really create impact is this idea that our relationships matter above everything else, and certainly above the algorithm. And this idea that relationships ripple. We don't go into them for that purpose. Like, I don't say I'm going to build a relationship with this person because I'm going to get something back. But what we have learned, what we have seen firsthand, is that the more we build relationships with our people, the more we do see our community grow, see our impact grow, see progress happen, because those relationships don't just impact us and the person we're having them with, they impact well beyond that. They absolutely ripple. So what we do for our relationships to really make this the primary piece of our business is we focus on showing up consistently. I mentioned that earlier. I think this is really key. And by the way, I say consistently with a lot of love, because as someone who has ADHD, as someone who is a very busy mom and spouse and lots of other things, showing up consistently is not always easy. And so I want to make this point really clear. Even though we focus on showing up consistently, I didn't say that we always show up consistently. We make it a goal of ours, but we are human. We give ourselves the grace to recognize that this is not always going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, we're human about it. We address it. We say, hey, last week was really hard and we didn't get that out last week. And it helps our people realize that they can also show up in the same way or not show up in the same way, because it's okay to be human. So that's a really important piece of it in our relationship building. We also focus on collaborating often, because we really recognize that it's not just about helping our community, it's about helping other communities. So the more we can work with other people who are doing really cool things, the more we can double or triple or quadruple our impact, right? If I have 1,000 people on Instagram and I put a really important message out there, 1,000 people are going to see it. But if I can work with someone who also has 1,000 people, now that's 2,000 people that we can impact and we can reach. And that right there just doubled our impact with just one small, very easy collaboration. So we do this a lot with social media. We do it a lot with creating like workshops and trainings and things like that, where we can bring in other voices, because that's another piece of it as well when it comes to impact. If it's always just only ever our voice or our perspective, then we're not doing as much with our impact as we could. So instead, we use our relationships, we use our platform to pull in other unique and important and critical voices as well, and that grows our impact too. And then lastly, connecting with our community. I mean, again, hopefully you've seen by now, in everything we do, we're constantly trying to build that connection with our community, asking what they need, asking what they're struggling with, understanding where they're coming from, asking how we can help. It's all about how can we form and deepen our connections and our relationships with our community. That is how we have our impacts. And then the fourth thing is meeting our people where they're at. And I already touched on this a little bit, but no matter what work it is you do in your business, even if it's like designing websites, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if it's not something that is super emotional like money is. It's so critical if you want to have an impact as a small business or a small team, that you meet your people where they're at. You recognize what they're bringing to the table, to the conversation, to the space, and what they need to make progress and to go further with this work. And so for us in the money space, what's really important is understanding their financial traumas, understanding their cultural history, their family history around this, understanding their mindset around money, understanding the barriers that they've faced and are facing, understanding their anxieties, their fears. And by understanding all of this, we can create content, we can create offers, we can show up, we can create systems and processes that really speak to and recognize these critical components of each of the people in our community. And when we talk about an impact, I mean, my God, the number of people who have said to us, like, I never felt safe talking about this before. I never felt safe addressing the money stuff before. I felt stupid. I felt like I was bad at money. In all of these other places. And then they come to our community and they're welcomed, they're celebrated. And that is so important. I mean, that impact is so much greater than any check I could write to a nonprofit if I had a big corporate, donation budget, right? So it's really recognizing that you have the power to create a space for your people that heals or that harms. And I think that is such a beautiful responsibility that we absolutely do not take lightly. So, like I said, when we're talking about understanding our people, we want to understand their current situations, what they're going through right now. We want to understand their histories, their traumas, what they really need. And I say it in that way because sometimes what they think they need isn't what they actually need. And you learn that through talking to them. But bottom line, at the end of the day, all of this comes back to putting people first. We are working with people, these are real people. And they're not a wallet, they're not a credit card, they are not, a profit line. They are real people. And for us to be able to have an impact in our business, I don't care what size your business is, for you to be able to have an impact, I think you truly have to put people first. Because if you're not doing that, then I think your impact is shallow. I think it falls short of what's really needed. So this is really, really critical for us. And then lastly, I mentioned this at the beginning when I was talking a little bit about like, what do we mean by impact? But for us, success is not 7, 8, 9-figure launches. It's not going viral. It's not having 1 million followers. Success is about sustainability because the work we do is so important and we're so passionate about it that if we had to stop doing it, that would feel like the failure. And I'm not talking about like the business failing or whatever. I just mean like if for some reason that work had to end, that would be the failure for me because the work is so needed. And so for us, success is how we keep this work sustainable for as long as possible. And the words I put here, I think ordinary is the new radical. For so many years, we've seen, and I'm married to a startup attorney, so I see this firsthand a lot. We've seen, people do these tech startups and they raise, gazillions of dollars and they build this really big thing and it gets valued at some number that is astronomical. And they're like lauded as like the world changer, the impact maker. They win all these awards, they get on all these stages. And that is what we're told we need to aspire to. That is the way to do things. That's the game changer. But I actually think building a business that's ordinary, building a business that's smart, building a business that is stable, building a business that is sustainable is the new radical because so little in this world is sustainable right now. It never before in my lifetime, certainly, has it felt like so much is on the precipice of extinction. And so I think there is something absolutely radical in this idea of sustainability that through all of the char, through all of the dumpster fires, through all of the hatred, through all of the pain and trauma and harm that's being caused to so many people right now, we're building something that's going to sustain, that's going to make it through. I think that is an act of resistance. And I think that's super cool. And I think just in general, choosing to buck the trend or the MMO and instead staying small, still being profitable, but staying small, and really focusing on how you can be impactful and aligned with your values. I think that is an act of resistance. And so that's for us such a big deal. And look, we're still a business. We still need to make money. We still need to pay myself. We need to pay the team. We need to pay our bills and all of that. So we don't ignore profit. We don't throw out those aspects of business, but we recognize that this idea that bottom line is the decider of whether or not you're successful or the decider of whether or not you've had an impact, that is BS. What matters more to us and what creates more profit and what creates more impact is the ripple. And that ripple is what comes through all of the work that I've been talking about today. And so for us, the real definition of success is not profitability, it's sustainability, and it's that impact that we can have and the ability to keep doing both. We would not be successful if we only had one and not the other, because impact is such a huge core component of the work we do. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions at all or thoughts on this, we are on Instagram at Equitable Money Project. That's the best way to find us and to reach out to us. And I really can't wait to hear more about how you are having an impact in your small but mighty ordinary business.